I will fight to the end. Doesn't matter what the world brings against me. I will fight to the end. Doesn't matter what people...
Hello, Virginia. My name is Martha Boneta of Liberty Farm in beautiful Fauquier County, and it is my pleasure to be hosting Cut to the Chase on behalf of Senator Amanda Chase. Senator Chase is the representative serving the 11th Senatorial District, which includes most of Chesterfield, Amelia, and Colonial Heights. In addition to the following committees of healthcare and education, transportation, local governments, privileges, and elections, Senator Chase is also on the subcommittees of Certificate of Public Need and Higher Education. I'm a huge fan of Amanda Chase. She has done tremendous work, and just recently, she received the highest rating by the Tea Party Patriots Federation that rates all of the members of Senate and the House in the Virginia General Assembly, and her score is the highest of both the House and the Senate. And it's been a real privilege for me to know Amanda Chase and to host Cut to the Chase. During Senator Chase's first year in session, she worked on restoring our concealed carry permit reciprocity with other states. She promoted education choice and opposed state government's excessive spending. So with that said, I will be your guest host for Cut to the Chase on behalf of Amanda Chase for the remaining General Assembly session. So with that said, we have a very special treat for you today. Tim Phillips, president of Americans for Prosperity, will be joining us on the show today. We will be discussing Obamacare that has been on the news quite a bit and on everybody's hearts and minds nationally. And for those of you that don't know what a special treat this is to have Tim Phillips on our show, let me tell you a little bit about him. Tim Phillips has been president of Americans for Prosperity, serving in the role since 2006. He is a veteran political strategist and one of the nation's premier grassroots organizers. His 30 years of experience includes presidential, gubernatorial, and congressional races, as well as state legislative, local, and issue advocacy campaigns. In 1992, Tim managed Congressman Goodlatte's first congressional campaign and later served as Congressman Goodlatte's chief of staff on Capitol Hill for 4 years. In 1997, he helped found Century Strategies with Ralph Reed, which became one of the nation's leading public affairs, political consulting, and public relations firms. He was named a rising star in politics in 1998 by Campaigns and Elections magazines, one of Politico's top 25 policy players in 2012, one of the Political 50 in 2014, and one of the Hill's top DC players in 2015 and 2016. He regularly appears on Fox News, CNN, Bloomberg, MSNBC, and Fox Business. His opinion editorials have appeared in dozens of publications, including the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, the Washington Post, New York Times, and many others. Tim Phillips resides in beautiful Loudoun County, Virginia, and when he's not there, he is all across the nation fighting to save America. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Tim Phillips.
Hi, Martha. Good to be with you.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
Let's start with, last week the Senate took first steps toward a repeal of Obamacare. However, it was a baby step, and it appears the Republican caucus in both chambers is split over exactly how to proceed. Tim, tell us where the fissures are and what to look for in coming weeks.
Absolutely, Martha, you're correct. It was a first step. It was a procedural motion that allows the Senate to begin moving forward. But Republicans are split on one central question. Will they go ahead and repeal this entire law, which has been so hurtful for Americans, really from all walks of life, and which has not lived up to the promise that Barack Obama and others called for with this legislation? Will they just simply pull it up, put it where it belongs, which in my view is on the ash heap of history, or will they nibble around the edges and try to get the politics right? And I can tell you right now there's a big debate going on. You've got Speaker Ryan, who has clearly said, let's repeal this law completely. and then let's begin moving forward. It can be simultaneously on a replacement for it, or it can be in the weeks and months after repeal of the law. That's what he is calling for. We think that makes a lot of sense. Others, though, individual senators, Senator Tom Cotton, Senator Rand Paul, a few others have said, no, let's not repeal until we absolutely have the replacement for it in place and the support in place. Martha, the problem is that you can repeal this law with 51 votes because of the way it was passed back in 2010. However, if you start replacing elements of the law with some of the really good free market reforms that Republicans are supporting, and certainly Americans for Prosperity we support, the threshold could very well be 60 votes for that in order to overcome a Democrat filibuster. So that's the rub. And we're urging Republicans to move quickly and to be bold, to simply repeal this law, begin working on a replacement, but don't hold up repeal for too long. And that's the crux of the matter.
Yeah, you touched on this already, but maybe we can talk about it, a little bit more in terms of the number of GOP Senate campaigns across the nation and repealing Obamacare being a winning issue for our GOP candidates. What's different now that you're seeing?
That you're exactly right. In campaign cycle after campaign cycle, in 2016, it was a winning issue when then candidate Donald Trump called for the repeal of Obamacare, and when Senate Republicans like Pat Toomey and Rob Portman and Marco Rubio and Ron Johnson, senators that were in these tough reelection battles, they were all calling for repeal of Obamacare, and it's a winning issue. In 2014, it was the same thing when we won the Senate back, when Republicans rather won the Senate back. Repealing Obamacare was a winning issue. In 2010, when Nancy Pelosi was made the ex-Speaker of the House, which is a wonderful thing for the country, I think we both agree on that.
Yes, we do.
One of the biggest issue that year was repealing Obamacare. So in campaign cycle after campaign cycle, it's been a winning issue for Republican candidates. And they held votes, literally dozens of votes over the last 6 years when they held Congress, and certainly the House and Senate. Now they have both chambers. But everyone knew they could pass their votes or their bills, knowing that Barack Obama would veto the legislation. Well, now Republicans have the House, the Senate, and the presidency. So now when they take that vote, it actually can become the law of the land, in other words, repealing Obamacare. So I think for them, it's that gulp moment, when you realize, hey, the rhetoric I've had for a number of years is now a reality. So when I cast this next vote, it could actually mean we repeal this entitlement, this law that's failing so many Americans. I think the reality of that's making some of the Republicans nervous, but we're telling them, keep your word. The American people want authenticity. They voted for change this year. There's no question. They were voting for change. And so we're urging the Republicans in both the House and the Senate, and then the president-elect, soon-to-be president within a week, to go big on this. And the biggest way to do this is to simply repeal the law, lock, stock, and barrel. Do it now. Let's start working on a replacement, absolutely. But let's not have it be months of disentangling. Let's have a big vote and do this now. You're keeping your word when you do that to the American people. You're bringing the change they want to see. But also, and this is frankly the most important part, you're helping millions of Americans who have been harmed by Obamacare. They were promised that they could keep their doctors. That turned out not to be true. They were promised that if they liked the insurance they had, Martha, you know that.
Absolutely.
But it turned out not to be true. They lost their insurance. Millions of Americans did. Millions more Americans were promised good private health insurance by Obamacare, and instead they got dumped into Medicaid, which is a failing federal program that hurts them rather than helping them. So even beyond keeping your word, which is very important, even beyond going big and bringing the change the American people want, which is very important, by doing this, they're helping improve the lives of millions of Americans who are languishing under Obamacare.
And it's heartbreaking to hear the stories all across our great nation, and they seem endless. So we're gonna take a break shortly. We ask that you stay with us so we can continue to talk about Obamacare. We're all getting ready right now for the inauguration next week. Everyone is very excited. There's just so much. There's a sense of hope, and as you said, the folks voted for change all across our great nation.
Right.
And when we come back from our break, we're going to talk about exactly what we can expect from President-elect Trump in terms of Obamacare, and we look forward to discussing that further with you. The question is, after all the excitement of the inauguration, it's time to roll up our sleeves and really get to work on repealing Obamacare and what that's going to look like.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Stay tuned, everyone. We'll return in just a few minutes with Tim Phillips, President of Americans for Prosperity. Welcome back. This is Martha Boneta, your host for Cut to the Chase, and we are live with Tim Phillips, President of Americans for Prosperity. Tim, we were talking about repealing Obamacare, and during President-elect Trump's campaign, he repeatedly called for the repeal of Obamacare as well. Right. Has Trump indicated how he wants the Senate and House Republicans to proceed?
He has, Martha. He has said that he wants them to move quickly, that this should be one of the first, if not the first, substantive legislation that they take up. And so he's made that clear. He's leaving a lot of the details to them, which makes sense because Congress they're the ones who write the legislation, of course, so it makes sense. He's left the details to them. But he's made clear he wants them to move quickly on this. This should be one of the first, if not the first, big piece of legislation he wants to see from the Republican Congress get to his desk.
Absolutely, and I know millions and millions of Americans are hoping that this is done as soon as possible. Tim, you're on the road a lot. You're talking to activists. You're saving America. What do activists tell you they expect to happen in the weeks after Donald Trump, Mike Pence, and the GOP take over?
Martha, that is such an important question. What are the expectations of the millions of dedicated Americans from every walk of life? You talk to a lot of these folks
Yes.
as well, who have given their time, their most precious commodity, their time. They've taken time away from families and kids and jobs and churches and synagogue and so much to pour their hearts into knocking on doors and making phone calls and going to rallies and events, and so much of this activism. And they're expecting big change. They've heard the rhetoric on Obamacare from Republicans in the House where they would say, we're going to repeal Obamacare, but we don't have the Senate. And that was true. That was an accurate statement. So these activists went out and worked hard and helped Republicans win the United States Senate. And then they were told, well, and again, this was correct. They were told, though, they don't have the presidency. Obviously, Obama's going to veto our legislation. It was encouraging last year to see Tom Price, who is now will be the new HHS, Health and Human Services Secretary. It was his legislation that he wrote last year that made it through the House and the Senate, repealing Obamacare. It was the first time legislation doing that had gotten to the president's desk. That was a big step forward. Obviously, Obama vetoed it. We knew that was going to happen, but that told our activists out there, hey, the House and the Senate can work together in a strong, principled fashion, get this done. Now it's the presidency.
Oh, absolutely.
Now Donald Trump has been elected. He takes office next Friday, after he's sworn in. And if Republicans don't move with genuine urgency and across-the-board repeal of Obamacare, there will be a deep disappointment. I think there will be a lot of anger, frustration among this activist base that's so important to the country and certainly to the conservative movement and to the Republican Party. So their expectations are high. Frankly, they should be high. This has been a battle that a lot of folks, including the organization I work with, Americans for Prosperity, we've been fighting this battle since the spring of 2009. Victory is in sight. Martha, we have the opportunity to do something that simply has not been done in American history. modern American history. That is to completely uproot and do away with an entitlement program that's been passed. That simply hasn't happened in the modern era for a major entitlement program. It can happen now. And it's not about the politics. It's not about just the activist base or these politicians. It's about the millions of Americans whose lives have been harmed by this entitlement, by Obamacare. That's why we have to do this. Yes, it's good for these guys to keep their word. Yes, it's good for this activist base of conservative freedom fighters to go out there and work so hard and then see the fruits of their labor when a bill like Obamacare is finally repealed. But really the most important thing, it's the lives that are going to be improved. It's the people who are going to be able to get off of Medicaid, which is a failing program, that where it's difficult to get in to see doctors, especially specialists, where a lot of children are not getting the health care they need and deserve because of this failing bureaucracy. It's about a lot of other folks who look at these Obamacare exchanges where they go on and where they're promised health care, and only one company is still offering insurance, Martha. One. There's no competition. So you know how bad that policy is going to be. And then when they get the policy, they pay a deductible or they get a subsidy. The deductible, it'll be $1,000 or $2,000 or $2,700 for the deductible. Well, these are folks who have modest incomes. So even though they have insurance, it's insurance in name only. That's what they're stuck with under Obamacare. There are better alternatives to replace this. I mean, I think about a broadening of health savings accounts, which will let people be consumers of their health care, making their own decisions rather than just being pulled around by the medical system. I think about letting people purchase insurance across state lines,
yes,
which would bring enormous competition to it. I also think about risk pooling, where folks with high-risk issues, maybe pre-existing conditions, they can enter broader risk pools that will lower costs for them, give them more choices, more options for their families, for themselves. So there are better solutions. There's a better way to give people quality health care. I mean, we still have the best health care system in the world. I mean, you don't have foreign leaders and elites flying to England to be a part of the National Health Service. No way. That's a terrible program. They fly to the United States. They fly to Freedom Land. They fly to us because we have the best insurance, our best health care in the world, but we can make it better, and it starts with repealing Obamacare.
Absolutely.
I think Republicans are going to do it, Martha. I think they're going to do it, but the results, if they don't do it, would be devastating.
It would be one of the most extraordinary, enormous, nationwide disappointments, one of them, our country has faced. You know, we talked a little bit about how in recent years we've seen congressional Republicans really lose confidence of many grassroots Republican activists across the nation. And I know that you know firsthand about that disappointment. We're going to take a break in about 2 minutes. I know what a busy man you are fighting to save America all across the country. When we come back, can you talk to us about how close are Ryan and the Trump administration, Donald Trump and McConnell, are they working well together? And what we can expect to come from those relationships, working together on repealing Obamacare. When we return with Tim Phillips, President of Americans for Prosperity, on Cut to the Chase. Thank you so much for joining us. Tim, I know you have grassroots activists all over the country that have been fighting this fight. And now the day has come where we can finally hope to see the repeal of Obamacare. Folks are anxious. They're hoping that it will happen very soon. And millions of Americans are relying upon the repeal of Obamacare. And we really look forward to hearing from you on the relationships there and how they have, what impact they're going to have on the ability to move forward with repealing Obamacare. Did you want to touch on that briefly? They had signaled me too soon that you were going to break, so I apologize about that.
Well, everyone saw last summer, Speaker Ryan had, there was discomfort with Donald Trump, the candidate. No question about that. There was worry. There were times when they didn't appear together at events because of concerns that the speaker had over the kind of candidate Donald Trump was being at that time. Well documented.
All right, we'll be back
in a few. After the break.
Thank you.
I will fight till the end. Doesn't matter what the world brings against me.
Welcome to Cut to the Chase. This is Martha Boneta, and we have guest Tim Phillips with us, President of Americans for Prosperity. Tim, before we went on break, we were talking about the relationships with Speaker Ryan, Leader McConnell, and rank and file members. In terms of their relationships with the Trump administration, are they working well together? Do you foresee them being able to come together and repeal Obamacare that millions and millions and millions of Americans are relying upon?
I do. I think that they are going to get this done. Trump and Ryan and McConnell obviously had issues during the campaign. That was clear. But I can tell you since the election, they've been meeting together on substantive issues on a consistent basis. Their staffs have been meeting together, and they're actually talking through all these key issues like Obamacare. I know on Monday and Tuesday of this week, Ryan personally met with a number of the key Trump people on tax reform. That's coming down the pike hopefully after Obamacare's repeal. So they are working together. I think they understand two things. One, that they are all in this together, that the country chose to give Republicans the presidency, the House, and the Senate, and so they're in this together. And two, that this country faces big problems, big challenges, and expectations are high for change, genuine, dramatic change on these issues. And then these are honorable people. They want to do the right thing, and so I actually am optimistic on Obamacare that they're going to get this done.
Well, you, me, and millions of Americans. So let's say, Tim, they do the right thing. They come together. We repeal Obamacare. What's next? What can millions and millions of Americans expect from here? What are the key priorities?
One of the areas that we are most encouraged by, along with Obamacare, is rolling back the Obama environmental agenda. It's such an ideological agenda.
Yes.
It's harmed job creation. It's driven up prices too often on utility bills and gasoline prices for individual Americans, certainly those on fixed incomes or those who are struggling to make ends meet. And it looks like with Trump's appointment of former Attorney General of Oklahoma, Scott Pruitt, as the head of the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, that was one of the best appointments in a long time by anyone. He did it. I think it signals that the Trump administration is serious about having some common sense environmental policies that still protect clean air and clean water. We want to protect this God-given environment we have. But it's become an ideological agenda for the left. And so often their environmental policies in the name of climate change or global warming have killed jobs. They've driven up the cost of products for Americans. They've raised utility bills, gasoline prices. So I think you're going to see executive orders coming from the Trump administration that will begin rolling back some of these policies that, after all, were passed by executive order by the last president or by the current president, President Obama. Wouldn't it be wonderful, Martha, when we can say the past president, Barack Obama? Wouldn't that be wonderful? I'm excited about that.
Absolutely. There's so much hope and excitement everywhere I go.
There is. And so I think on that front, you're going to see enormous progress. The clean power plant rules that this administration rolled out through the EPA, we're hopeful that the incoming administrator, Scott Pruitt, will begin ending these clean power plant provisions, which they'll be able to do. Another area that we're incredibly optimistic on is tax reform. We have a tax code that has a corporate tax rate at 35%. That needs to be dramatically cut. It looks like, I know Speaker Ryan's committed to that. It looks like the Trump administration will be too. So we think tax reform that lowers the corporate rate, that does genuine reform to the repatriation taxes, because right now we have almost $1 trillion of profits sitting offshore that can't get back without having to pay repatriation taxes. We need to end those or at least dramatically scale them down. And then there are over 40,000 special interest provisions in the tax code. That's wrong. It has government playing referee too often, picking winners and losers. We want to see a tax reform or tax code that is flatter with rates and far fewer exemptions, these special interest exemptions. So I think on the environment and on tax reform, you're going to see dramatic movement. And then the president said yesterday, or President-elect said yesterday, that folks can expect a Supreme Court justice pick within 2 weeks or so after he's sworn in. So, Martha, that's going to be an enormously important battle for the Scalia seat, a man who was one of the great justices and great minds of the last 50 years on the court.
You're not kidding. And you could not imagine the joy and thrill. I went to George Mason University School of Law.
That's right, you did,
I
yes.
did. That's where I got my law degree, and to have my law school, my alma mater, be renamed in honor of Scalia is just it's such an honor and a privilege for me to proudly wear the name Scalia on proudly with the school I went to law school. It's a beautiful honor. Tim, we are about to go to break. We have Tyler Foote that's going to be joining us next to talk about how we can cut the red tape in Virginia. Thank you so much for all you do all across our great nation with Americans for Prosperity.
Thank you, Martha. Great being on with you.
This is Martha Boneta on Cut to the Chase, and we now have a very special guest with us, Tyler Foote. Tyler is Virginia State Director for Americans for Prosperity. And just to give you an idea of what Tyler Foote has accomplished here in our beloved Commonwealth of Virginia, he and the statewide activists helped to defeat the $500 million Fairfax meals tax. He also kept over $60 million in economic activity from legalizing short-term rentals like Airbnb. Also stopped $5 million of property tax increases in Spotsylvania and mobilized activists against the Virginia Beach Light Rail. We have a lobby day coming up on Monday, and we are very excited as well because Tyler Foote with Americans for Prosperity is going to cut red tape in Virginia. Welcome, Tyler.
Thank you for having me, Martha.
You know, we are so excited about a piece of legislation, a bill that's going through the Virginia General Assembly. I believe the patrons are Michael Wiebert, Delegate Michael Wiebert, and Nick Freitas, Delegate Nick Freitas. And
yeah, those two are our patrons on the House side. On the Senate side, Senator Amanda Chase is going to carry it as well. So we have a lot of good leadership on this bill.
We are so excited. All three great leaders in Virginia, and wanted to know if you could tell our listeners all about the legislation, why we are all so excited about it, and what our listeners can do to help see that this bill becomes law.
Well, absolutely. We're pretty excited about this bill as well. I mean, all you have to do is travel outside of the Beltway to know that Virginia is an economic slump. Our economy has grown at a sluggish pace the last 4 years, and we've fallen to the 13th best state to do business according to the latest CNBC rankings. And we're sitting by while states like North Carolina continue to pass reforms that make their state more friendly to business. So we need to make some changes fast if Virginia's going to turn things around. As I travel the state talking with our activists, Martha, I meet a lot of small business owners, and most say the same thing, that it's not fun anymore because government is putting too many hurdles and roadblocks in their way. They're spending more time and money navigating burdensome regulations than they actually are running their business and growing their business. So if Virginia is going to be successful, we need to make sure that government works for the people, not against us. And I think that's a pretty easy concept that most people will agree with. Luckily, we have some great delegates and senators in Richmond who agree. Like we were talking about, AFP partnered with Delegate Nick Freitas, Michael Webert, and then Senator Amanda Chase introduced the Red Tape Reduction Act. And for those of you that want to look it up that are listening, it's HB 1564. It's called the Red Tape Reduction Act, HB 1564. And the intent of the bill is real simple. We want to cut the red tape that small business owners and Virginians all across the state are getting tied up in. So it requires that for every new regulation that's introduced, two have to be eliminated until we reduce our regulatory requirement footprint by 35%. Once we hit that 35% threshold, then it becomes for every new regulation that's introduced, one has to be eliminated. So not only does it cut the red tape and the regulatory requirements in the state, but it also caps it as well. And we got this idea from the British Columbia. They implemented a similar model in 2001. And the Mercatus Center, which is a very well-respected think tank out of, or I guess it's a part of George Mason University out of Nova, they just came out with a study that looked at the success that the British Columbia had after implementing this model, and their economy was actually one of the worst performing in Canada. And then after a couple of years of this legislation being implemented, it shot up to one of the best performing economies in the British Columbia. So there's a model and there's a track record for success here. So our goal is we want to get this passed and with the governor to sign it, and then sit back and after a couple of years look back at all the regulations that have been cut, and as a result of that, all the new jobs that have been created, and see all the economic growth that has been created as well.
You're absolutely correct. And number one, we need our Virginians to keep more of their hard-earned money. We need less regulation. I mean, there are horror stories all over the place, from the amount of regulation required even to braid hair or to become a masseuse. And we can go down the list of ridiculous scenarios that really hinder entrepreneurialism, hinder the opportunity to be self-reliant. And, this bill, I believe, gets us closer to where we need to be, and that's hope in the American dream. And what are some of the obstacles that you foresee in the path of making this bill law?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think there's obviously, entrenched interest that want to, that don't want to see this bill passed because they benefit from a lot of these regulations being in place. So if I had to guess, we're probably going to see a lot of those folks come out of the woodwork. Maybe those are established corporations or entities that, like I said, benefit from these regulations because they prevent new marketplace participants and new competition from entering. So, and then I also think that that there's a lot of people that are just scared. They don't really, they like the general idea of cutting government, but they don't really know what that looks like, and they're not willing to take the courageous step of actually cutting government. And so that's why I'm excited to be working with folks like Delegate Nick Freitas, Michael Weber, and Senator Chase, because we need leaders like those folks to step up to the plate and say, you know what, this is a tough challenge. We will take some heat for it, but in order to get the economy back on track, in order to get Virginia back on track, we need these types of reforms. So I think we have a great team in place, and I'm pretty hopeful that we'll be able to see some positive movement.
Absolutely, and what I always talk about is how important it is when we have great leaders that are willing to carry the torch for a pro-freedom policy agenda, that we lift them up and we give them all the support and backing they could possibly ever want. Because if we're going to have legislators that are going to carry bills that provide for less government and more opportunity, we need to make sure that they have all the backing and support they could possibly have. How can everyday Americans, grassroots activists, folks that want more opportunity and are tired of Virginia not being on top across our nation, what can they do to help our representatives get this bill through?
Yeah, well, I have a couple thoughts here. Number one, I think there's a false perception in politics that the average grassroots citizen, that their voice doesn't matter, that politicians tend to listen more to lobbyists and then the donors than they do the average citizen. And I think what this past election showed us is that the grassroots are still in charge. We have a voice, and if we use it, if we exercise that voice, we can really make a difference. So what I encourage everybody to do and your listeners to do is make sure that your legislators know that you support this bill. Again, it's called the Red Tape Reduction Act, HB 1564, HB 1564. Call your legislators, call your senators, say, listen, we know this is coming up on the floor soon.
Tyler, we ask that you hang on the line with us. We're going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back and finish up on the Red Tape Reduction Act. This is Martha Boneta with Cut to the Chase. We have Tyler Foote with Americans for Prosperity on the phone. Tyler, thank you so much for joining us. We have about 3 minutes left. And we wanted to know, my phone's been getting blown up with text messages from friends and activists all over, hearing all about the Red Tape Reduction Act, House Bill 1564. And on Monday is Lobby Day, and Americans for Prosperity always has a huge presence and brings activists in from all over the Commonwealth. And you have a full day of speakers and ways for folks to get involved. I was hoping you could talk a little bit to us about that.
Yeah, very quickly, we have a fantastic lobby day set up for this coming Monday. We actually are very close to being sold out. If we're not already, we have about 200 95 people joining us on Monday. I think the most important thing to emphasize is that we will make sure that you are meeting with legislators from your region. So if you're from Nova, you will meet with legislators from Nova. That way you are talking to people that actually make decisions on laws that impact you and your specific community. So it's a great opportunity to actually get FaceTime with legislators and talk about issues that are important to you and your family. We also have a great lineup of speakers from Ed Gillespie, Supervisor Corey Stewart, Senator Frank Wagner, Denver Riggleman. Martha, you'll be there as well.
Yes.
So we have a great lineup of speakers that are there to share their thoughts on how we can get government out of the way and make Virginia more competitive again. So we're looking forward to it. If you're interested in attending, go to virginialobbyday.com, virginialobbyday.com.
And if listeners throughout, the Richmond area and Virginia want to become members of AFP, or they want to be activists for AFP, they want to get involved, they want Virginians to decide what's best for Virginia, they want to break down barriers to success, they want to allow Virginians to keep more of their hard-earned money, how can they do that?
All you got to do is go to americansforprosperity.org, and there's all the information you need there about our state chapter, americansforprosperity.org.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Tyler. We look forward to seeing you, and thank you for cutting the red tape in Virginia.
Thank you for everything you do, Martha.
Great. Thank you. Talk to you soon. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Martha Boneta on Cut to the Chase, and it's my privilege and honor to have been able to host the show on behalf of Senator Amanda Chase. As you all know, Senator Amanda Chase is going to be co-patroning the bill we just heard about, which is the Red Tape Reduction Act. I am very excited about this piece of legislation, and we are so fortunate to have leaders, legislators like Senator Amanda Chase that carry legislation like this for us. And it is a path to prosperity. It's a path to more entrepreneurialism. It's a path for Virginians to be on top all across our nation compared to other states. And want to thank Senator Chase for carrying this bill. And I want to thank you all for the privilege of hosting Cut to the Chase for you. And I look forward to our next show. And I just want to end by reminding everyone that man is not truly free unless government is limited. Thank you so much. God bless you all. God bless the Commonwealth of Virginia, and God bless the United States of America.